Tonight on Bridge City News, an out-of-control wildfire near High Level has forced the evacuation of thousands of people. Police in Medicine Hat were dealing with a suspicious package left behind at a high school today. And today was the first sitting of the Alberta Legislature since the spring election. Premier Jason Kenney wants to deliver on promises that will impact both business owners and young people.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. An out-of-control wildfire continues to rage about 3 kilometers from High Level in northwestern Alberta. The entire area has been evacuated as the blaze inches closer to the town itself. Joining me now from High Level with an update is the editor of the High Level Echo Pioneer, J.W. Schnarr. J.W., what's the latest?
They have a sprinkler program that they have for this kind of stuff. They basically set up sprinklers around the edge of town and just wet everything down. And that's all in place, and they were doing fire patrols all night. There was an evacuation yesterday. Almost, I guess, around 4,000 people left the area. That's the town and the Dene Bushy River Reserve beside us, and some areas in Mackenzie County as well.
How large is the fire, and has any of it been contained so far?
Well, I looked at the wildfire stats this morning. They don't have the size of the actual fire. It still says that it's burned just about 70,000 hectares. We can't see it from town. It's just really smoky today. Yesterday, you were able to see like the big plumes of smoke and stuff, but today everything's just like a big haze. It's out of control. They've been, from what I heard this morning, I listened to the Premier talk about how the fire was, it's too hot to fight head on, so they're just kind of managing at the moment from what it sounded like. And of course, in town here, the effort has strictly been keeping the east flank of the fire from encroaching on the town.
Do we know yet what caused the blaze?
No, they haven't. I'm not sure how much investigating is happening, and I haven't heard anything. The fire chief hasn't been able to tell me anything along those lines. So,
have there been any injuries reported?
What I heard this morning is no injuries, and like I mentioned, there hasn't been any damage to the town as of this point.
How many firefighters are currently battling the blaze?
So I was told last night, including the high-level firefighters that are here, there's about 90 firefighters in the high-level area. And from what I heard this morning, I guess there's more coming. The fire chief said last night there was going to be more coming up, and I heard this morning that there's going to be firefighters coming from Ontario and Nova Scotia as part of mutual aid agreements.
Not only have you had to deal with poor air quality with all of the smoke, but also power outages?
Yeah, the power's been out since yesterday morning, so it was Monday morning. ATCO had initially thought that they might have the power on by last night. That didn't happen. We got an update last night saying that likely, like tonight, might be the earliest that they can get at it. There's not a lot of infrastructure up here. When the power line gets damaged, it kind of cuts out power to a huge area, right?
That was J.W. Schnarr, editor of the High Level Echo Pioneer newspaper, with an update on the High Level wildfire. Many of us, of course, remember the 2017 Keno wildfire, which destroyed thousands of hectares here in southwestern Alberta. Some farmers and ranchers also lost their homes. Fortunately, the town was saved. As Jeanette Rocher explains, not only is the town flourishing now, but they're getting ready for a special food festival.
The streets of Waterton look empty today, but the town is gearing up for a crowd this weekend with the 5th annual Taste of Waterton Festival.
So the food festival starts May 24th. It goes on till June 2nd. It all kicks off on Friday at the Thirsty Bear Social. So every restaurant from all over Waterton, so almost all of them will be there setting up a booth. They'll be handing out their specialties, as well as craft breweries from all over Alberta. We've got an awesome band coming in. It's the big kickoff event.
The festival, which is running Friday, May 24th and Friday, May 31st, couldn't have come at a better time. The 2017 wildfires affected not only many of the town's surrounding trails, but also the local businesses.
You know, last year was a tough year, especially the beginning of last year when not a lot was open. But as the season progressed, we got a bunch of hikes. You were able to bike up Red Rock Canyon, then eventually Cameron Lake. Currently, you can bike up Cameron Lake and Red Rock.
We've been really happy with the progress that's been made so far. We've been able to provide access to a number of trails since the fire. That will continue, and we're working on some more extensive projects now. Behind me, there's Cameron Falls. There's viewpoints near the falls that were affected by the fire, so that's one of the many projects being worked on. We expect the Carthew-Alderson Trail to be fixed at some point, either late this summer or this fall. And excited to say that we hope to have the Red Rock Parkway open to vehicles again this summer at some point.
Also, he says the visitor center will be moving to a new location. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
The Lethbridge Fire Department and the Lethbridge Police Department are competing to see who is better at baseball. The two groups will be competing in a charity baseball game called the Battle of the Badges that is raising funds for a great cause.
We deemed it Battle of the Badges. We were approached by Diabetes Canada, and we knew a couple of the cops, and we kind of collaborated together and made this whole thing work. Cool, and we're really lucky that us and the police, we have a job where we're in the community lots, and we're really well supported by the community. So it's lots of fun to get out in front of the fans and stuff and do these events, and kids get really excited. The Bulls are a big deal in Lethbridge, and we collaborate a lot with them as well. So it's a real fun, exciting event, and we're a lot of us are friends with the cops, kind of off duty. So it's a good like rivalry that we have going.
The game at Spitz Stadium will take place on June 18th, and you still have time to get tickets. They're $10 each. The explosive unit of the Medicine Hat Police Department responded to a report of a suspicious package earlier today. The item was left at the Crescent Heights High School parking lot. Students and staff were sheltered in place, and residents were asked to avoid the area. The Medicine Hat Police Service says the package was rendered inoperable, and a portion of the school's parking lot was blocked off for further investigation. Lethbridge East and West MLAs Nathan Newdorf and Shannon Phillips were in Edmonton today to kick off the spring legislative session that will run until August the 1st. A top priority for the UCP government is the Carbon Tax Repeal Act. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf says getting rid of the carbon tax does not mean that the UCP government is not taking the environment seriously.
Yet still leaving in place the tax on emissions for large emitters to really control and work on our emissions, because we do want a cleaner, healthier, better environment, better future for our kids. So we want to balance both aspects. I think that's what appealed to most of us members of the UCP, is that it was balanced legislation to be able to remove it off the ordinary people that didn't have a choice, and yet still maintain it on large emitters where we have to do the work and make a difference, and make some strides and improvements that way. So that'll be that's the important distinction. We would be very much in line with what Quebec actually does in their carbon tax.
Premier Jason Kenney said the tax will be eliminated by May the 30th. Meanwhile, the UCP government adds that there will be about a dozen bills tabled during the sitting, including ones proposing to change the minimum wage for young people and to cut the corporate tax. A full budget is not expected until the fall. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman got his hands dirty earlier today celebrating Public Works Week. Spearman helped the City of Lethbridge electrical workers replace a 60-year-old electrical pole.
Today's our opportunity, and this week is our opportunity to say thank you to the gentlemen that work in public service, and in this case in our electrical department in the City of Lethbridge. They provide a high level of service, so right now we're replacing lines and poles, and we're not inconveniencing any of the current customers as this replacement takes place. So electricity is maintained to the homes in this area, despite the fact that we're doing a major replacement of the wires and the poles. So we'd like to thank our employees for the work they do for the citizens of Lethbridge and the City of Lethbridge.
Since the first National Public Works Week celebration in 1960, officials have used the third week of May each year to educate and inform the public about the essential role public works plays in our community. There have been a lot of talks these days about money laundering issues in Canada, especially those tied to real estate. Experts say it's been around for a long time in our country, and some refer to it as an old, open secret.
The reason why real estate is a large vehicle to be able to do this is because illicit money needs to become legal. And when you're talking about hundreds and thousands of dollars that need to become legal, very easy to do that, especially in a market like BC where you're talking millions of dollars. And that can be problematic because what ends up happening is that the consumer will end up paying for it in the long run. Houses do become inflated, and of course, now the values go up.
Quintero says while Canada's toughened up its laws around money laundering, every time the government tries to crack down, the potential beneficiaries of that flow of money have always pushed back. Another honorary degree will be dished out at the University of Lethbridge's spring convocation ceremony on May 31st. The honor will go to international real estate developer Navjeet Bob Dillon. Dillon started up the very successful Dillon School of Business. He came to Canada at the age of 19 as a first-generation Sikh immigrant with no assets. He dabbled in real estate by purchasing undervalued properties, renovating them, and then selling them for a profit. It was a strategy that would form the basis of his company called Mainstream Equity Corporation. His company now has 12,300 units with $2 billion in market value. Despite a lot of opposition, the Pride flag will be flying at the provincial building in Taber. Petitions banning and supporting the flag began on the website change.org. The petition against the raising of the flag garnered about 1,000 online signatures. Many took issue, saying the rainbow colors represent a symbol of covenant faithfulness and that Christians are deeply grieved and hurt that a biblical symbol is used to represent non-biblical actions. Being heart healthy is very important, but so is the health of your gut. Dr. Clayton Coggino is a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge. He says when it comes to probiotics, we have to be careful since sometimes they can make people feel a little bit worse.
A lot of times people don't understand that a probiotic can be detrimental to your health as well. And so overall, probiotics are very good and for sure people can take them. But for example, if you have candida or a fungal overgrowth and you take a probiotic with a sugar in it called fructooligosaccharides or FOS, you'll make that problem way worse. You'll feel a lot worse.
Catch my full interview with Dr. Coggino discussing the best ways of dealing and fixing irritable bowel syndrome. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told attendees at a conference in Toronto that our country's thriving technology sector is a result of our openness to immigrants. He hopes Canadians will continue to view immigration positively.
There's no question that as the world is changing to being more of a knowledge economy, more tech, more innovative, access to talent is going to be at the core of success for businesses, for economies, for entire countries. And that's why Canada, even though we've been a country that has always had great natural resources, and we will continue to, we've always layered onto them innovation and talent on top of it. But that's really come to a head recently as we've determined that the Canadian advantage is in providing extraordinarily well-educated, hardworking, forward-thinking, creative, ambitious Canadians to be part of the global economy. So access to talent obviously comes from immigration, and it comes from training up and educating Canadians right.
Another tornado has hit the Deep South in the United States. The governor of Louisiana toured a community where at least 50 homes and businesses were hit. People in areas of eastern Oklahoma are also dealing with severe weather damage.
So we're asking everyone to be extremely cautious. We've been very fortunate that there hasn't been a loss of life or a serious injury yet. Quite often in these types of natural disasters, when that's the case, we will have a serious accident or even a fatality when individuals go out and start the cleanup.
Did sound like a freight train. We were very blessed to have the wind stop when it did. I locked my door because I knew if I walked out, I was going to get blown away. The wind was that strong.
It was on this day that Charles Lindbergh began a transatlantic flight. Amelia Earhart starts her trek across the Atlantic and explore Christopher Columbus dies. This is Today in History for May the 21st.
May 20th, 1927. Aviator Charles Lindbergh takes off from New York's Long Island aboard the Spirit of St. Louis. Some 33 hours later, Lindbergh lands in Paris, becoming the first person to fly solo nonstop across the Atlantic Ocean. 1932, aviator Amelia Earhart takes off from Newfoundland, Canada for Ireland, becoming the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. 1961, the Freedom Riders suffer more violence as they campaign against racial segregation in the South. This time, the civil rights activists are attacked by a white mob in Montgomery, Alabama. That prompts the federal government to send in U.S. Marshals to restore order and protect the activists. 1506, Christopher Columbus, the explorer whose transatlantic voyages led to European colonization of the Americas, dies in Spain. And 1989,
I think that the people are worrying too much about conserving this country's natural resources.
in Los Angeles, comedian Gilda Radner, an original cast member of TV's Saturday Night Live, dies of ovarian cancer. She was 42. Today in History, May 20th. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Christian men's ministry Promise Keepers has announced plans to launch a national event next year. As we find out in this next report, it is hoping the movement will ignite a revival among men that was sparked in the 1990s.
Promise Keepers, the Christian men's ministry which filled stadiums across America and convened over 1 million men to the Mall in the District of Columbia in the 1990s, has announced a new national event at the AT&T Stadium in Dallas, July 31st and August 1st, 2020. The significant gathering is projected to draw 80,000 men from across the country and around the world, with another projected 5 million participating via simulcast. Pastor Art Remington Jr., National Ambassador at Large for Promise Keepers, says the key to reigniting this movement will be unity among different ministries and denominations.
Our heart is to partner with other ministries. As Ken Harrison, our president, chair, CEO, he says, let Promise Keepers be a platform for other ministries to men around this nation. And that's what it's got to be, all of us locking arms and locking shields, pushing back the gates of hell, and especially getting men to rise up and become the men of God. And then we will see this nation transformed and changed for His glory and His kingdom.
Remington concluded by sharing how he believes this could be a catalyst for revival far greater than what they experienced in the 90s.
It's not about Promise Keepers being back again, but it's about a move of God in the hearts of men. The revival we saw in the 90s that is going to be just a shadow in comparison of what we're going to see worldwide, where God's going to get men back to the basics. They're going to get back to their knees, praying, fasting in the Word of God. And then we're going to see our nation and the world change for the glory and the kingdom.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
I remember my first Promise Keepers event in Edmonton in the 90s. It was definitely life-changing. It was a soggy start to the work week with more rain today. The clouds should be clearing out tomorrow. Full weather details are coming up. We had light showers and cool wind off and on today. Tonight, a 30% chance of rain developing and a low near 4 degrees. Tomorrow, partly cloudy with a high near 18. Thursday, mainly sunny with a high of 20. Friday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 18 degrees. A nice weekend is shaping up. Sunshine and 20 on Saturday, sunny and 21 degrees for Sunday. Monday, the mercury will climb even further to 26 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 19 and an average low of 5. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1980 at 32 degrees, and the record low was a chilly -4 in 2001. Sunrise was at 5:39, sunset at 9:17. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Lots of sunshine for Victoria and a high near 21. Just a few clouds at 21 as well for Vancouver. Mainly cloudy and 18 degrees for Calgary tomorrow. Sunshine and 23 for Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 19 is expected in Regina on Wednesday. Sunny and 23 for Saskatoon. Expect rain and 13 degrees in Winnipeg tomorrow. Lots of sunshine and 16 in Toronto. Just a few clouds and 20 for our nation's capital. Sunny and 19 for Montreal. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have light showers and 13. Halifax, Nova Scotia will also have rain and 8. Charlottetown, PEI will be cloudy and rainy with a high near 6. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain mixed with snow and a high of 3 degrees tomorrow. Ottawa's announced a new tourism strategy designed to boost industry revenues by 25% by the year 2025. Tourism Minister Melanie Joly says the strategy will boost international visits to Canada during non-peak seasons by more than 1 million people. It includes $58.5 million to help communities create or improve tourism facilities. In addition to boosting tourism revenue by $128 million by the middle of next decade, the feds also hope to create an additional 54,000 jobs. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board is buying a 7% stake in specialty food company Premium Brands Holdings. The board is purchasing more than 2.6 million shares in a deal worth around $200 million. The company intends to use the cash to repay debt, finance organic and acquisition growth opportunities. It also signed agreements with certain shareholders to raise an additional $60 million through the sale of a total of 788,000 shares. Auto manufacturer Ford is cutting about 7,000 white-collar jobs. That represents around 10% of its global workforce.
Ford was expected to do this for quite a long time. They're laying off 7,000 white-collar workers. They've been in the process of doing it, but the fourth and final wave is coming this week. Most of the 7,000 workers will be overseas and not in the United States, but they'll do about 2,300, mainly in the Detroit area. About 1,500 of them have already either left voluntarily or taken buyouts, and then 300 have been laid off so far. The other 500 are going to get the news this week, which is not a good thing. A lot of employees are on edge, waiting for the news, which could come starting tomorrow.
Home Depot is reporting better than expected profit and revenue for the first quarter despite a damp start to 2019. The company says it earned just over $2.5 billion or $2.27 per diluted share. That beat analysts' expectations at $2.16 per share. Revenue rose to $26.38 billion, up from $24.95 billion a year ago, which also topped expectations. Overall store sales were up a modest 2.5%, which was short of the 4.2% industry analysts had expected. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, close to 5,000 people have now been evacuated in and around the town of High Level in northwestern Alberta as a wildfire continues to inch closer to the town. So far, there are no reported injuries. The out-of-control wildfire is currently at 70,000 hectares and growing. Is there help available for those who have celiac disease or irritable bowel syndrome? Lethbridge naturopathic Dr. Clayton Coggino will let us know next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out and support a worthy cause. The Lions Foundation of Canada Pet Value Walk for Dog Guides is taking place on Saturday, May 25th at the Gunnery Picnic Shelter at Henderson Lake Park in Lethbridge. The mission of this foundation is to provide dog guides at no cost to Canadians with a medical or physical disability. For more information and to register for the walk, go to walkfordogguides.com. The YWCA Lethbridge District will be hosting summer play camps from July 2nd to August 15th. They're currently seeking volunteers between the ages of 13 and 17 who enjoy being outdoors and playing with younger kids. This is a great opportunity to develop leadership skills and begin to build experience for future resumes and school applications. Volunteers must be able to commit to at least one full morning or afternoon each week. For more details, call Yvonne at 403-329-0088. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Joining me now in studio is Dr. Clayton Coggino. He's a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. He's also done some training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science Kinesiology and 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. And today, we're going to chat about some digestive health concerns. Dr. Coggino, welcome back to BCN.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's chat a bit about the difference with irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, and celiac. What's the difference between the three?
So let's start with celiac. Celiac is an autoimmune condition. So it's diagnosed through something called an anti-TTG or an actual biopsy of the intestine. That's the most accurate. It's autoimmune, so it's very severe, and it means that you cannot have gluten. Zero gluten in anything, even something so simple as like having a toaster with bread would cause, basically it's a depletion of the, they're called microvilli. They allow you to absorb nutrients in your small intestine, and it basically destroys them. So it's really severe. Inflammatory bowel disease is different than irritable bowel. Irritable bowel, you get off and on pain, bloating, and just more mild symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, stuff like that. That's more mild, whereas inflammatory bowel, that's usually an autoimmune, which is much more severe. It's a little bit harder to diagnose, and the symptoms can be a lot more detrimental to your health.
So what would actually cause IBS or irritable bowel syndrome?
Yeah, so that's probably the most common thing that I see. Irritable bowel syndrome, it can be caused by a lot of things. One of the main things that we see as naturopathic doctors that causes it is food intolerances. Now, a lot of other things can cause it. Stress is another huge one. When you're really stressed out, which most people are very stressed out in today's society, it shuts off the digestive tract, shuts off the digestive juices and secretions that allow us to digest food. So when that happens, food doesn't digest properly. It kind of sits there, or it becomes stagnant and it starts irritating the gut. When that happens, food can get through into your bloodstream without being properly digested, and that can activate an immune reaction called an immunoglobulin G reaction, which then your body can send systemically everywhere, creating a wide variety of symptoms.
So how do we actually fix irritable bowel syndrome? Is it a lot of the foods that we're ingesting? Stay away from those foods?
Yeah, so beyond a food allergy, beyond stress, you can also have things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. How do you fix it? It really depends on what the cause or causes of the problems are, right? And so a lot of times I'll run a blood test, a food allergy test. It usually tests 120 foods, although you can do extended panels. And by eliminating a lot of the foods that might be causing that irritation or inflammation, you'll fully resolve your symptoms. If it's something like candida overgrowth or fungal overgrowth, then you can take different nutraceuticals to kill that candida, maybe go on a specific diet to kill it. And if it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it's a very similar situation to candida, although the protocol slightly changes.
Why do you think that is? Like when I was a child, I don't know if you were the same way, but I could eat and drink everything.
Right.
No reaction, no allergic reaction, no irritable bowel syndrome. But now that I'm a little bit older, I can't really drink milk anymore, milk products, right?
Yeah.
So lactose intolerant, and all these other things pop up, and food allergies.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, so lactose intolerance, about 80% of our population is lactose intolerant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to come across someone that can really tolerate a dairy product well. There's a lot of ways of getting around a lactose intolerance. That's to sugar. That's basically your inability to digest the lactose sugar found in dairy. Why it happens as you get older, I think it's just we're exposed to a lot of toxins, we're exposed to a lot of stress. Things start not working quite as well as they used to. Perhaps we get dysbiotic flora, or by that I mean bacteria that might be unhealthy. We take antibiotics, so it kills off good bacteria and allows bad bacteria to come in, or maybe even just fungal overgrowth to come in. So there's a lot of different reasons why, as we age, we start seeing more irritable bowel syndrome. But it certainly can still happen a lot in kids and even like very young children too.
I notice as you get older, maybe it's the older body parts. Kind of like your car, starts breaking down, right?
It starts breaking down.
Time for some new body parts.
That's right.
Now, how common is celiac?
Celiac's actually more common than you think. It's more undiagnosed than you think. I diagnose it quite a lot through blood work in my clinic, or I'll refer back to their medical doctor to do the testing as well. But yeah, it's a lot more common, and usually people with celiac present with slightly more severe symptoms, digestive tract pain. However, sometimes they just present with bloating. So often I'll, at the same time as testing food allergies or SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, candida, stuff like that, I'll just run a quick blood work for celiac just to rule it out, because it's so severe. You really have to do your due diligence when you're ruling out or looking into digestive tract
Any
problems.
chance of misdiagnosing someone, perhaps?
So the
There's
test,
a lot of similarities with them. Right?
Yeah, no, because when we're doing lab testing, the lab testing is medically accredited. It's an objective lab test. We're sending it away to a lab. The testing itself inherently could potentially be slightly inaccurate. Like, I think a celiac test is about 98% accurate. So if we're really certain that this person has celiac and it comes back negative, we may want to retest again, or even get them to do a biopsy, which is not ideal and certainly not the first thing to do, but sometimes it has to be done.
I've heard of the expression, doctor, leaky gut.
Yes.
I've got a leaky gut. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so or it's leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability.
I'll stick with leaky gut.
Yeah, stick with leaky gut.
Okay.
It's easier to say. But that is essentially where your gut becomes inflamed. The cells in your gut become inflamed and they start to splay open a little bit. There's junctions that hold them together called gap junctions and tight junctions that hold your cells of your small intestine together. When those become inflamed, they can open up a little bit, and then they allow the food particles that you eat to go through them, and instead of going through the cell properly. And when your food doesn't get down to the size that it should be, your body sees a big hunk of celery protein, for example, and it sees it as foreign and it attacks it. And that's where leaky gut can cause a whole wide variety of symptoms, like not just gut pain or IBS, but it can cause like asthma, it can cause fatigue after you eat, it can cause rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, acne, a whole bunch of different things.
Is there anything that we can do to actually flush out our system outside of water?
So to me, it's more first initially figure out what the problem is by doing testing. Eliminate the food so it takes some pressure off your gut, off your digestive tract, and then go on a very small and short-term gut healing protocol, something like a high-dose omega with EPA. It's the anti-inflammatory component of an omega-3 or fish oil. A really high dose of that, and then something else called glutamine, L-glutamine. And it is an amino acid. It's the most abundant amino acid in our bodies. And it actually binds the enterocytes, or the gut cells, back together.
How much does stress impact our overall gut health?
Hugely. Stress stops your digestive flow. It stops the motility. It's a massive component of it. Absolutely.
And what about probiotics? We touched on them a little bit earlier. How important are they to our overall health as well?
Probiotics, they're hit and miss. They're often overused, actually.
Oh.
A lot of times people don't understand that a probiotic can be detrimental to your health as well. And so overall, probiotics are very good, and for sure people can take them. But for example, if you have candida or a fungal overgrowth and you take a probiotic with a sugar in it called fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, you'll make that problem way worse. You'll feel a lot worse. So a lot of patients that I see, they'll come in and they'll say, why do I feel so bad after I took this probiotic? Right. And then we'll do some testing on them and say, you actually have candida. Similarly, with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you take a probiotic, you're adding to the good, healthy bacteria that have migrated from your large intestine into your small intestine, and it'll make your symptoms way worse.
So if we actually did need a probiotic in our diet, instead of the capsules or tablets, what natural foods could we ingest?
Well, you can ingest yogurt, although it's more for maintenance. Kombucha is the same thing.
Is it like the non-sugary yogurt? Because I like the nice thick Greek yogurt with all the sugars.
I don't think it really matters.
It doesn't
Of course-
matter?
No,
Oh.
but the sugar itself probably isn't good for you.
Well, that's the tasty part.
I know,
You got to
right?
work with me
Well,
on this.
hey, you got to have some give and take, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, probiotics, fantastic.
Cottage cheese,
They're
would
good.
you have anything in there? Maybe not cottage cheese?
No,
No? It's more
not
the
really.
yogurts?
Yeah, cottage cheese will have a lot of lactose in it.
Right,
Might upset
right,
your
yeah.
stomach.
Yeah, well, but for me, it would. You're right, absolutely. Okay, what about heartburn? A lot of people get it, or was it gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD?
Yeah,
You know, a lot
GERD,
of
yeah.
people have that.
Mhm.
I've heard that apple cider vinegar may actually help with that naturally.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so apple cider vinegar, the reason why it might help for some people, because heartburn can be a little bit complex, but it would help in the instance that you actually had low stomach acid. And that wouldn't allow, so sometimes patients, as we age, we actually decrease our stomach acid production.
Oh.
So a lot of times patients will come in and say, it just kind of started, now I'm getting heartburn. Well, a lot of times it has to do with the fact that you're getting low stomach acid and it's not allowing the sphincter to close off. So that any bit of stomach acid that is present in your stomach is splashing up into your esophagus. In cases like that, if somebody takes something acidic, like apple cider vinegar and even HCl pill, their symptoms of bloating or heartburn will fully go away.
Wow.
In the case that somebody has an ulcer, that would make them much, much, much worse in the fact that then they would have to take a Tums or some type of antacid to neutralize that immediately. Otherwise, they do more damage. So you got to be a little careful with it.
Now, how would you diagnose digestive tract issues?
Just in general,
Yeah.
Digestive tract, I would do lab testing.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, that's the number one. I mean, we take a really detailed history of the patient, which is extremely important. And from that, we can base, okay, which lab tests do we think we need to do?
Do
Because
they come back within a week? Like how soon do you get
you
results?
typically, between a few days to a couple weeks, depending on the lab that we use, how in-depth it is. But yeah, lab testing is really key because the digestive tract is really compartmentalized. So the stomach has certain symptoms, the liver has certain symptoms that can cause digestive issues, large intestine, small intestine, they all have different lab tests associated with them and symptoms associated with them.
Now, what about a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth?
Yes.
How does that affect your overall gut health, or SIBO, I guess?
Yeah, so SIBO,
SIBO,
is
right.
what we call it,
Okay.
or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So
Yeah.
it is where bacteria, which normally inhabit the large intestine, that's where they should be, that's where they're healthy, but they've moved into the wrong spot. And they've moved into the wrong spot for a lot of reasons. Usually it's retroactive flow if somebody's sick or something like that, but surgeries can do it. There's a lot of different reasons. SIBO, we can diagnose it with a breath test, actually. That's the most accurate way to diagnose it. Yep,
Okay.
It's the gold standard. And SIBO, basically what it does is it can cause either IBS in general or really bad constipation, really bad, not usually diarrhea, but usually really bad constipation and bloating. Bloating is a huge symptom of it. And the reason is because when you eat food and it goes into your small intestine, you have now a bunch of bacteria that shouldn't be there that eat your food. So you're not getting the nutrients that you should be getting because the bacteria are eating it and they're producing hydrogen gas or methane gas because they're eating the food.
So how would you actually treat SIBO then?
So really you have to kill the good healthy bacteria that are in the wrong spot.
Wow.
So that's where if you took a probiotic and you had SIBO, you're just adding healthy bacteria to the wrong spot. And you're never going to fix it. You can also do something called a low FODMAP diet. So there are certain sugars that will feed that bacteria. It won't fix the problem per se, but it will decrease a lot of your symptoms. But certain herbs, actually herbs and antibiotics have been studied extensively. The herbs actually work just as good as the antibiotics do. And the antibiotics, unfortunately, won't kill the methane-producing bacteria. They'll only kill the hydrogen-producing bacteria. So often I'll use a combination of the two, or just herbs to kill it. You can also do something called an elemental diet.
Okay.
And it's called a physician's elemental diet because it is a tricky one to do. It is a liquid diet for 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
Fully nutritious, like
Yeah.
it supplies your body with every nutritional need that it needs, but it's a liquid diet.
Interesting,
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah.
How would you help a pregnant woman with her gut health? And more specifically, because you're actually helping two people.
Yes.
Or maybe even more. She has twins.
Yeah,
right?
yep, that's a good point. You have to be a little bit careful with that because you don't. I don't like guessing. That's where testing really comes in because you don't ever want to tell a kid or someone that's pregnant who needs those nutrients to eliminate a food without actually knowing that they need to eliminate a food. So I would do a food allergy panel on them or a food sensitivity panel on them, tell them exactly what might be irritating their digestive tract, and then be really careful with respect to what supplements we put them on because certain supplements would be more contraindicated in pregnancy, and after pregnancy then we can treat it a little bit more aggressively. But
before I let you go, I want to ask you a bit about seniors and how you help a lot of seniors with their gut health. What are some of the major issues you're seeing when seniors come see you?
It's a good question. There's not. Honestly, it's very similar. Digestive tract issues, as you just said, they kind of almost become a little bit more prevalent as we age. I think with seniors, one of the biggest things is actually malnutrition. A lot of times seniors aren't really eating a healthful diet or enough. It seems like a lot of times appetite decreases or maybe their gut is just in pain. And so just kind of working through that with them is probably the most common thing that I see.
Dr. Clayton Coggino, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. Thanks a lot for joining me again in studio.
Thanks again for having me.
It is not uncommon to see media reports that assign a level of blame onto faith-based schools for damaging social cohesion in society. There's a culture of clash between secular and religious viewpoints. Today's guest has co-written a study on this topic. Ray Pennings is the Executive Vice President of the Christian think tank Cardis, and he joins me now from Ottawa. Rock and Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Ray, some believe that faith-based schools tend to shelter their students from the real world and produce people who are intolerant of others' viewpoints. What did your study find?
Well, it's actually a series of studies that we've done over the course of the past decade in partnership with Notre Dame. And what we have done is we've looked at the adult population on 3 separate occasions in the US and 3 separate occasions in Canada. So it's actually 6 representative studies. We looked at adults 23 to 39. We had a control group that went to public school. Then we had other adults who had the majority of their K-12 education in all sorts of non-government schools. We didn't just look at faith-based schools, but for the purposes of this, including faith-based schools, especially Protestant and Catholic. And what we found is that when it comes to their adult behaviors, they tend to be more civically engaged than students from similar social economic status who went to public school.
So how did you really determine which people groups tended to clash more and which tended to be more civil?
What we did is we measured behaviors on everyone's part. So we looked at 3 things. We looked at spiritual outcomes, academic outcomes, as well as civic outcomes. So we asked, did you vote? Do you volunteer? We used Stats Canada's criteria of volunteering and charitable giving, so we could compare to the population as a whole. So on a whole range of measures, what we found is they were more, especially on the civic side, not on every measure necessarily. Ironically, they tend to vote a little less in some jurisdictions, which was a little bit of a surprise to us. They protest a little less and on different things. But when we take the total cumulative engagement and involvement, graduates of faith-based schools are equal or greater involved than graduates of public schools.
Well, that's interesting that you say the graduates of religious-based schools stand out when it comes to giving and volunteering. How do those attributes contribute toward a more civil, tolerant society, Ray?
Well, the very fact of giving and volunteering means you're not thinking about yourself, first of all, but you're thinking about someone else. And when you're engaged in that, it's a view, it's an activity, but it's also a view of the world. Do you look at the world as a whole and your place in it? Or do you look at yourself and everyone else in terms of how they can serve you? 2 different mindsets in terms of approach to public life. And on a aggregate level, we can say with significant confidence and data to back it up that faith-based graduates have an other-mindedness which results in civic engagement and care of neighbor.
Now, recent Barna research shows that church leaders, parents, and schools are not speaking to one another enough on these matters. Our pastors and priests tend to avoid the topic of school choice, and apparently very few parents ever ask about it. Why do you think that is?
Yes, this survey, in addition to the regular surveys we did, we just partnered with Barna to do a survey of pastors, 650 pastors and priests in the United States, as well as we have a smaller survey in Canada. What we found is that for the most part, that conversation is not happening between church, home, and school conversations. In the occasions where it is, it's a delicate issue for pastors, obviously, and priests within their own congregations. There often will be a diversity of views, some kids attending public school, some a local faith-based school, homeschooling. So it's a difficult issue, but by and large, the conversation is not really happening.
Now, Protestant churches tend not to affiliate with any particular school, and apparently only about half of pastors encourage parents to check out a Christian school. Is the financial cost maybe a big reason?
There are a variety of reasons that were there. Cost was the largest single factor that was identified. Sometimes there were concerns about the local school or the quality of it. In some occasions, that was a factor. And in other factors, there was also a sense that encouraging kids to go to public school was a way also of exercising your faith and communicating and participating in the neighborhood around you.
Now, you talk about how pastors face pressure on social issues. They will be criticized if they do speak out on them, or also criticized if they don't speak out. So it's a non-win situation. How do they handle this?
It's a difficult matter, but certainly, and it will vary based on your own religious traditions and theological principles. But for most, it's an imperative. If they're going to be faithful to their own convictions, they are going to be required, so to speak, to address these issues. I think there is a growing recognition that parishioners live in a pluralistic society. And it's not only having a position on these issues, but learning how to communicate these positions with people who disagree with you in civil and constructive ways so that society can flourish.
Now, your paper points out that a healthy society is not only a matter of getting systems, laws, and policies right, it also requires attention to the formation of citizens with the proper habits and virtues for civic life. How important is it to choose the right school for our kids?
Well, education is holistic education. That's one of the reasons why our study, somewhat distinct from many other studies that look at education, did not just look at academic achievement. We just didn't count how many kids went to university and what sort of universities they did. We also looked at civic engagement, which we've already touched on, the volunteering, giving, participating in society, voting. We also talked on spiritual formation. And there is a sense in which education is for life. It's not just for work, it's not just for church, it's for life as a whole. And I think it's important that we measure the outcomes of education, also looking at all of the effects.
So Ray, let me ask you something. What are your thoughts on religion becoming more aligned or affiliated with political parties? Is that maybe a dangerous path to go down?
It is, although when you look at it, we've collected data over a decade now, and I would think the mainstream myth that, Christians are in a particular party or are politically aligned, when we actually we see diversity of voting patterns. You have Christians on the left and on the right. Those who get involved sometimes tend to be passionate in terms of their involvement, and that's probably as much the nature of politics. Politicals, whether religious or not, tend to be pretty partisan and passionate sorts. But certainly, I don't think you can take a look at the overall outcomes of religious schools and say there's a schooling effect which direct towards one party or the other. That's more a consequence of social economic status and family background than it is of schooling.
So how can Christian believers bring their convictions into public life while fully respecting the rights of others in a pluralistic society?
I would say that the very first thing as a Christian, my responsibility is to see the imago Dei, the image of God in everyone, including the person I most passionately disagree with politically. I think when I begin to see my political opponent as a fellow image bearer of God, Now all of a sudden that frames the nature of my conversation with him or her. Then secondly, I think you can realize the fact that we can disagree without being disagreeable. We can hold to positions and we can argue that based on data, based on material that's available to all of the public, and have robust arguments. Such it has always been in societies, and I suppose it will always be that way. But I would suggest that if we approach it by seeing the image of God and do it with a tone of hospitality, respect, we'll have something that looks quite different than Twitter today.
So how can we avoid the almost inevitable name-calling and put-downs when people disagree over like abortion, religion, and LGBTQ2+ issues?
Again, I would go back to what I just said in terms of the image of God. If I see the person I'm dealing with as a fellow image bearer of God, I am going to have a respect for that person, even if they live a lifestyle I totally disagree with. And if they in turn would see me in the similar sort of way, well, now we have a different sort of conversation, sort of name calling, and the two groups going into their own ghettos, which unfortunately is too much part of life today.
Let me ask you something too. I've talked to certain professors at universities who disagree with some of the ideologies that are being preached and pushed on students at these universities, but they still have to kind of fit in with the norm there. So how can we get back as a society to a place where it's actually acceptable to agree to disagree and still get along, you know?
Well, I think sometimes we think that if we only, all went to the mushy middle and found the things that we have in common, that somehow is the answer. I actually take quite a different point of view. I think it is important for us to be able to articulate what it is, our most deeply held convictions, articulate them into the public square, but find a way that does so respectfully and engages in an affirmation of the other person that they too have deeply held convictions. And it's in the dialogue that actually I think we will learn to respect and grow with each other. It's in the discussion of difference rather than the avoidance of difference.
And we have to understand, and really understand where the other person is coming from. Their background, where they grew up.
And taking, I would challenge, we live in a Christian society or a pluralistic society. I would challenge, Christians along the way rather than, segregating or coming to conclusions about people who are different than themselves, learning to understand. What do we know about Islam? What do we know about Sikhism? Do you know the difference between a Sunni and a Shiite and a Wahhabi? Just as we would expect them to know the differences between a Catholic and a Protestant and the various stripes within, and we recognize that there are some behaviors or beliefs that are more predictable in some groups than others. I think we need to become far more nuanced in understanding and appreciating our neighbor.
Now, you've often talked about spaces of grace when it comes to churches. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I think of religion, I think of three components to religion. There's an affirmation of a set of beliefs which are core to the faith, and as a Christian, for me, obviously the Bible and the teachings of the Bible are fundamental to that. There are a set of religious practices. I pray, I read the Bible, I attend worship, I participate in communion. And then there are behaviors that are out there in the public square as well. My love of neighbor, my giving, my approach to work as vocation. All of my life is religious, not just when I'm in church. I think church communities need to understand equipping people for living all of life according to their faith commitments. And I also think we need to be generous and hospitable, recognizing that, we confess we're all sinners. We need to be a place where sinners are welcome, where they're not judged, where they're welcome, where they're engaged with, but yes, where we affirm the truth of God's word, which doesn't mean we're automatically going to agree with every opinion or every lifestyle.
I guess, Ray, it really boils down to loving thy neighbor, but what if you have a neighbor that's not really that lovable?
Well, I would look at, I think all of us in that sense, when we see the unlovable neighbor, probably need to hold up the mirror, and the scripture says that when we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So for those who confess the name of Christ, we weren't all that lovable either, and he loved us.
And what's that expression again when you're pointing at someone else? You got one finger pointing at them, three fingers pointing right back at you, right? Ray Pennings is the Executive Vice President of the Christian think tank Cardis. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.